This German nurse wore an American soldier's Purple Heart for 56 years. He was blind. She was his enemy. This medal tells a story that history forgot. The story of 147 women who crossed the Atlantic expecting punishment and found something that would shatter everything they believed about America. The elderly woman's hands trembled as she opened the wooden box. Age had spotted her skin. Time had bent her fingers, but her grip remained steady enough to lift the lid. Inside, resting on faded velvet, lay a Purple Heart medal. The bronze had dulled over the decades. The purple ribbon had lost its vibrant color to the years. But the weight of it, the meaning of it, remained as heavy as the day a blind Marine had placed it in her palm. Her name was Elizabeth Braun. She was 82 years old. She sat in a modest apartment in San Diego, California, surrounded by photographs of a life well lived. A husband now gone, 3 children grown, grandchildren scattered across the country. But this medal she had carried for 56 years. And now, in the winter of her life, it was time to send it home. She picked up a pen. Her handwriting shook across the page. To the Sullivan family, I am returning what I have carried since 1945. Your son James gave this to me when he could not see it. I was his enemy. I was his nurse. This medal tells a story that history forgot. A story of 147 German women who came to America as prisoners and discovered that mercy can be more powerful than any weapon of war. She sealed the letter, placed the medal back in its box, wrapped it carefully. 3 months later, Elizabeth Braun would be dead. But the story she protected for 56 years would finally be told. 11 days earlier, June 1945, the Atlantic Ocean, a gray United States Navy transport ship cut through the waves. Below deck, in a compartment that smelled of salt water and metal and fear, 147 German women sat in darkness. They were nurses, prisoners, enemies of the most powerful nation on earth. For 11 days they crossed the ocean. For 11 days they did not sleep. They whispered the same questions over and over in the blackness. Will they beat us? Will they starve us? Will we disappear into labor camps and never see our families again? One woman clutched a small notebook to her chest. Her name was Margaret Schmidt, 23 years old, from Berlin. The notebook's pages contained 312 names. Every soldier she watched die on the Eastern Front. Every boy who bled out under her hands while she tried to save him. She kept count because numbers were easier than faces. Numbers didn't haunt you in the night. Numbers didn't call out for their mothers in languages you couldn't understand. Now, crossing this endless ocean, she wondered if her own name would soon be added to someone else's list. The ship's engines changed pitch. The women felt the vessel slow, then silence. An unnatural silence after 11 days of constant mechanical rumbling. A voice crackled over the loudspeaker. In English, first, then in German. We have arrived. The women climbed the metal stairs from the hold to the deck. Their legs were unsteady after days at sea. Their eyes burned in the sudden brightness of morning. Through the haze they saw it, the skyline of New York City rising from the water like a promise or a threat. Tall buildings that seemed to pierce the clouds. A harbor filled with ships. The richest city in the world, the heart of the enemy. Margaret pressed her notebook against her chest and stared. She saw photographs of this place in better times, before the war, when such things still existed. Images in magazines of a city that glittered with electric lights and possibility. Now she was seeing it with her own eyes, arriving not as a visitor, not as someone welcome, as a prisoner. Armed guards lined the gangplank, American soldiers in crisp uniforms, their rifles held across their chests, their faces showing nothing. This is it, Margaret thought. The punishment begins now. But then what happened next made no sense whatsoever. A woman stepped forward, an American woman in a military uniform, tall, gray hair pinned beneath her cap, ramrod straight posture, a face that looked like it never smiled and never would. She raised her hand. The procession of German women stopped moving. Silence fell over the dock. The only sound was the cry of seagulls and the slap of water against the ship's hull. Then the woman spoke, in German, accented but clear. You are prisoners of war, but you are also nurses. You will be sent to military hospitals across the United States. There you will assist in the care of wounded American soldiers. You will be treated with the respect due to medical personnel under the Geneva Convention. The German women stared at her. Some did not believe what they heard. Respect from the enemy. This had to be a trick. A lie to make them cooperate before the real punishment began. But there was no punishment. Instead, American personnel guided them toward waiting vehicles. Not prison trucks, not armored transports, Red Cross ambulances and civilian buses with cushioned seats. The doors opened, hands reached out to help them climb aboard. No one shouted, no one shoved, no one pointed a weapon. Margaret stepped onto a bus and sank into a padded seat. The fabric was soft against her legs. She pressed her palm against it and thought of the cattle cars that transported German refugees across the bombed landscape of her homeland. Cars where people stood for days because there was no room to sit. Where children died standing up because there was no room to fall. This was a passenger bus for prisoners. The buses drove north into New Jersey. The ride took less than an hour. Through the windows, Margaret and the others watched America pass by. Green trees untouched by fire. Paved roads without bomb craters. Neat houses with gardens and white picket fences. Children playing in yards. Women hanging laundry on clotheslines. Automobiles parked in driveways. Everything looked whole, alive, untouched by war. Another woman sat beside Margarete. Her name was Katharina Fischer, 24 years old, from Vienna. She worked on the Eastern Front where temperatures dropped to 30 degrees below zero and frostbite killed as many men as bullets. Katharina pressed her face to the window glass and stared at the passing landscape. In Vienna, she whispered, "My neighborhood was bombed 17 times. 12,000 people died. Buildings turned to rubble. And here," she didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Here was a world that war never touched. A nation so vast and so wealthy, that it fought a war on two sides of the planet and emerged not weakened but stronger. Behind them sat a third woman, Elizabeth Braun, 26 years old, from Dresden. She was on duty the night the Allied bombs turned her city into an inferno. 25,000 people died in 2 nights of firebombing. Elizabeth treated burn victims until her own hands blistered from touching charred skin. Now she sat in an American bus with cushioned seats and stared at children playing in a yard. Safe children, whole children, children who never saw the sky turn red with fire. The buses stopped at a large white building surrounded by trimmed lawns, a military processing center. Clean, orderly, the grass was cut in neat lines. Inside, American nurses conducted medical examinations. Women in pressed white uniforms. They took temperatures, checked blood pressure, examined eyes, ears, teeth, skin. The process was professional, clinical. There was no roughness, no humiliation. The American nurses touched them the way nurses touch patients, with competence and a certain distant kindness. After the examinations came the supply room, and what the German women saw there stopped them cold. Neatly folded on long tables were brand new uniforms, American nurse uniforms, white dresses with matching caps, white stockings, leather shoes in multiple sizes arranged in careful rows. American personnel measured each German nurse and handed her clothing that fit. Katharina held up her new dress. The fabric was soft cotton. The stitching was perfect. Every seam was straight. She brought it to her face and breathed in. It smelled like soap, clean soap, not blood, not smoke, not death. For the past year on the Eastern Front, she patched her uniform with scraps cut from dead soldiers' coats. She wore the same dress for 6 months because there were no replacements. She washed it in melted snow because there was no other water. Now she held clothing that looked like it came from a department store window. Pristine, untouched, made for her, for a prisoner. Then came the showers. The American staff directed them to a tiled room with multiple shower heads, chrome fixtures gleaming, white towels stacked on benches, bars of soap wrapped in paper. Elizabeth turned the handle. Water came out, hot water. Steam rose around her like a blessing. She stood under the stream and let the heat soak into her muscles, into her bones, into places that were cold for so long she forgot what warmth felt like. In the final months of the war, German hospitals had no fuel for heating water. Nurses washed with buckets of cold water when there was any water at all. Sometimes they didn't wash for weeks. Elizabeth picked up a bar of soap, unwrapped it, brought it to her nose. Lavender. Not the harsh lye soap they used in Dresden, not the chemical smell of disinfectant. Lavender. Like a garden in spring, like a world where such gentle things still existed. She lathered her hair. The soap made thick white foam. She watched it run down her arms and disappear down the drain, taking with it the grime of the Atlantic crossing, the dirt of the war, the smell of death that clung to her for so long. And then the tears came, not from sadness, from something else, something she couldn't name, something that felt like the opposite of pain, but hurt just as much. In the next shower, Margaret stood with her face tilted up to the water, her eyes closed, her hands braced against the tile wall. She thought of the Russian prisoner she refused to treat in 1943, the boy who bled to death while calling for someone named Katya, the boy whose face she saw every time she closed her eyes. She told herself then that there was no room for mercy in war, that resources must be saved for your own soldiers, that the enemy deserved nothing. Now the enemy was washing her with hot water and lavender soap. After the showers came the dining hall. Long tables set with plates. Real plates, not tin mess kits. Forks and knives. Cloth napkins. Glasses filled with clear water. American kitchen staff brought out trays of food. Steam rose from the dishes. The smell filled the room. Roast chicken with crispy golden skin. Mashed potatoes with butter, real butter melting into creamy pools. Fresh green beans. Warm bread rolls. Coffee. Real coffee with cream. And, for dessert, apple pie. The 147 German women sat down. They stared at the plates in front of them. In Germany, civilians were surviving on 1,000 calories per day. Soldiers at the front received even less. By the winter of 1945, people were eating grass, boiling shoe leather, digging through garbage for potato peels. This was more food than most of them saw in 6 months. On one plate, for prisoners. Margaret picked up her fork. Her hands trembled so badly she almost dropped it. She cut a small piece of the roast chicken, put it in her mouth. The taste exploded across her tongue. Rich, savory. The meat was tender and seasoned with herbs she couldn't name. Herbs that had no purpose except to make food taste good. Luxuries in a world where survival was the only goal. She chewed slowly, swallowed. Then she picked up the dessert plate. Apple pie. The crust was golden and flaky. The filling was soft apples mixed with cinnamon and sugar. She took a bite. Sweet. So sweet it almost hurt. Like everything good she forgot existed. Like childhood. Like safety. Like a world where mothers baked pies because they loved their children, not because they needed to stretch rations. And then the tears came. She did not sob. She did not make a sound. The tears simply rolled down her cheeks and dripped onto the table, onto her plate of roast chicken and mashed potatoes, onto her half-eaten slice of apple pie. Around the room, other women were crying too, quietly, over their food, over their coffee with real cream, over the simple, impossible fact that someone fed them like human beings. They cried because this was not punishment. This was kindness. And kindness after years of war felt almost unbearable. That night they slept in clean barracks. Real beds with mattresses. Sheets that smelled of detergent. Pillows. Blankets that didn't smell of blood or smoke or the bodies of dying men. Margaret lay in her bunk and stared at the ceiling. In the darkness, she could hear other women breathing. Some were already asleep. Some whispered to each other in German. They gave us uniforms, someone whispered. Like we are still nurses. They gave us dignity, came the reply. Margaret closed her eyes and tried to sleep. But her mind kept replaying the day. The American officer speaking German. The buses with cushioned seats. The hot water. The lavender soap. The apple pie. She thought of everything they told her about Americans. The propaganda that poured from German radio for years. Americans were cruel. They tortured prisoners. They showed no mercy. They were monsters who would punish Germany without pity. Everything was a lie. The next morning they learned their assignments. They would be divided into 7 groups, sent by train to hospitals across the country. Kansas, California, Illinois, New York, Texas, Ohio, Pennsylvania. Their job would be to care for wounded American soldiers, men returning from the battlefields of Europe, men who fought against Germany, men who had every reason to hate them. The numbers were staggering. Over 670,000 American soldiers were wounded in the European theater alone, another 250,000 in the Pacific. The hospitals were overwhelmed. American nurses worked double shifts and still couldn't keep up. By June 1945, the military needed 12,000 additional nurses just to meet basic care standards. They had fewer than 8,000. So German prisoners became emergency medical workers. Margaret Schmidt was assigned to Topeka, Kansas, amputee ward, Katharina Fisher to a rehabilitation center in Illinois, prosthetics and physical therapy, Elizabeth Braun to a naval hospital in San Diego, California, burn ward. The three women stood on the train platform. Around them, other nurses hugged goodbye, made promises to write, wiped tears. The three survived the Atlantic crossing together. 11 days in the dark, hold of a ship, whispering fears. 11 days of believing they would die in America. Now they were splitting up. Margaret hugged Katerina first, then Elizabeth. "We survived the war," she said. "We'll survive this." Elizabeth's voice was quiet. "Will we, or will we just learn new ways to break the train?" Whistles blew. Steam hissed from the engines. They boarded separate cars heading in different directions across a country none of them ever imagined they would see. Through the window, Margaret watched the landscape change. The cities gave way to farmland, endless golden fields of wheat stretching to the horizon. Small towns with white churches and main streets, barns painted red, cows grazing in pastures, children waving from farmhouse porches. She thought of the train rides across Germany in 1944, bombed out stations, destroyed bridges, refugees crammed into cattle cars with everything they owned tied in bedsheets, a child freezing to death on a Munich platform because the train was delayed 12 hours in the snow. Here, the American train had cushioned seats, a dining car serving sandwiches and coffee, clean bathrooms, heat. The contrast was almost too painful to understand. 3 days later, her train pulled into Topeka, Kansas. A military truck was waiting. It drove her to the hospital, a massive brick building, 3 stories tall, over 400 beds. The American flag snapping in the wind above the entrance. Inside, the hallway smelled of disinfectant and bandages and something else, something she recognized from the Eastern Front. The smell of wounds, the sweet, sick odor of infection, the metallic scent of blood. Somewhere deeper inside the building, someone was screaming. Margaret's hands clenched. She knew that scream. She heard it 1,000 times. Morphine wearing off, phantom limb pain, the sound of men whose bodies remembered parts that no longer existed. A woman in an American Army Nurse Corps uniform was waiting in the lobby. Captain Sarah Bennett, head nurse, stern face, sharp eyes, 40-something years old with the posture of someone who never bent to anything in her life. Captain Bennett looked Margaret up and down. Her expression revealed nothing. "You will work 6-day weeks," she said. 8-hour shifts. You will follow orders from American medical staff. You will treat every patient with professionalism. You are a prisoner, but you are also a nurse. Act like it." She handed Margaret a name badge and a ward assignment card. M. Schmidt, Ward C amputees. Margaret's hands shook as she pinned the badge to her uniform. She followed an American nurse down a long corridor. Polished tile floors, pale green walls, doors opening onto rooms filled with beds. The American nurse stopped at one doorway. "This is your ward. 42 patients, most lost limbs at the Battle of the Bulge or during the Rhine crossing. Some have infections. Some have phantom pain. All of them have been through hell." The nurse paused, looked directly at Margaret. "They know you're German. Some will refuse your care. Some will say ugly things. Do your job anyway." Then she walked away. Margaret stood alone in the doorway. Inside the ward, dozens of eyes turned toward her. American eyes, the eyes of soldiers who fought against her country. Men who watched their friends die from German bullets and German bombs. One man, a sergeant with both legs amputated below the knees, stared at her uniform, then at her face. Then he spat on the floor. "They're making us get cared for by Nazis now," he said loudly. "What's next? Hitler himself comes to fluff my pillow." A few men laughed, most stayed silent, but the tension in the room was thick enough to choke on. Margaret took a breath. She walked to the first bed. The chart hanging at the foot read, Private David Chen, age 19, right arm amputated at the shoulder. Infection, dressing change needed twice daily, morphine every 4 hours for pain. She picked up the chart, read it carefully. Then she looked at the young man in the bed. He looked away. I am here to change your bandages, she said in halting English. Private Chen said nothing. Margaret gathered her supplies. Clean gauze, antiseptic, scissors, tape. Her hands moved automatically. She did this 1,000 times before. On German soldiers, on Russian prisoners, on dying boys who called for their mothers in languages she didn't speak. She began to unwrap the bandages on the private's shoulder. He flinched but did not pull away. The wound beneath was red and raw, healing but still angry. She cleaned it gently, applied fresh antiseptic, wrapped it in new gauze with precise, careful folds. When she finished, Private Chen finally looked at her. His eyes were hard, suspicious. But he nodded once. It was not trust. It was not friendship. It was not even acceptance. But it was not hatred either. It was a beginning. Margaret moved to the next bed, and the next, and the next, working in silence, changing bandages, checking wounds, adjusting morphine drips. No one spoke to her. No one thanked her. But no one refused her care either. When her shift ended 8 hours later, she walked back to the nurses' barracks with legs that barely held her up. She collapsed onto her bunk. That night she wrote in her notebook. Below the 312 names of the dead, she wrote something new. June 18, 1945, Topeka, Kansas. Today I cared for my enemy. He didn't want my care. I gave it anyway. Is this mercy or is this atonement? I think of the Russian boy I let die. I think of Private Chen's nod. I don't know if one can erase the other, but I know I must try. She closed the notebook, placed it under her pillow, closed her eyes. Tomorrow she would return to Ward C. Tomorrow there would be more bandages to change, more wounds to clean, more silent patients who looked at her and saw the enemy. But tonight, for the first time since the war began, Margaret Schmidt felt something she thought she lost forever. Purpose. Not the purpose of serving a flag or a regime or a cause. The purpose of serving the person in front of you, whoever they are, whatever side they fought on. The purpose of being what she trained to be before the war took everything and turned it into ash. A nurse. Nothing more, nothing less. Just a nurse. 5 days passed. Margaret worked her shifts in silence. She changed bandages. She adjusted morphine drips. She cleaned wounds that smelled of infection and rotting tissue. She did not speak unless spoken to. She moved quietly between the beds like a shadow in a white uniform. Most patients ignored her. A few muttered insults under their breath when she passed. One man refused to let her touch him at all. He demanded an American nurse every time she approached. Captain Bennett allowed it. She simply reassigned Margaret to other patients who did not object. But Margaret did her job. Every bandage changed with precision. Every medication administered on schedule. Every wound cleaned with gentle, competent hands. She learned on the Eastern Front that you could survive anything if you just kept working. If you just focused on the task in front of you. The next soldier, the next wound, the next crisis. Don't think about the bigger picture. Don't think about what it all means, just work. But Private David Chen watched her. The 19-year-old boy with the missing arm noticed things. He noticed that she never complained, never took breaks, never asked for anything. He noticed that her hands were steady when other nurses' hands shook. He noticed that she checked on patients even when it wasn't her assigned duty. And he remembered something. On his second night in Ward C, Chen's wound infection spiked. Fever, chills. His temperature climbed to 104 degrees. The night nurse administered antibiotics and called for additional monitoring. Margaret's shift ended at 6 that evening. But at 11, when Chen woke from a fever dream, she was there, sitting beside his bed, monitoring his temperature, changing the cool cloth on his forehead every 20 minutes. He asked her through chattering teeth, "Why did you stay?" "You needed care," she replied. That was all. No speeches, no attempts to win him over. Just 3 words. You needed care. By morning, the fever broke. Margaret worked through the night. When the day shift arrived, she simply stood up, made her notes on his chart, and walked back to the barracks to sleep. Chen never forgot that. Now on the morning of June 23rd, he made a decision. He saved part of his breakfast ration. 2 slices of toast, 1 cup of coffee from the pot the orderlies brought around each morning. In 1945, coffee was rationed even for American soldiers. Standard allotment was 2 cups per day. Saving 1 meant going without. Chen wrapped the toast in a napkin, poured the coffee into a clean cup. When the breakfast trays were cleared, he asked an orderly to place them on the nurse's station desk. Then he wrote a note. His handwriting was shaky because he had to use his left hand now. The right arm that used to hold a pen was gone, amputated at the shoulder on a French battlefield. The words came out crooked but readable. For the nurse who doesn't sleep. Thank you, bed 14. He folded the note, placed it beside the coffee cup. Then he sat back in his bed and waited. Margaret arrived for her shift at 6 in the morning. The June sun was just beginning to light the Kansas sky. She walked to the nurse's station to collect her patient charts for the day. There on the desk was a cup of coffee. Still hot, steam rising in the cool morning air. Next to it, a folded piece of paper. Margaret stopped. She looked around the ward. Most patients were still asleep. A few were awake watching her. She picked up the note, unfolded it, read the shaky handwriting. For the nurse who doesn't sleep. Thank you, bed 14. Bed 14, Private David Chen. She looked across the ward. Chen was sitting up in his bed. When their eyes met, he nodded once. The same nod he gave her 5 days ago when she changed his bandages for the first time. Margaret picked up the coffee cup with both hands. It was warm against her palms. She brought it to her lips and took a small sip. The taste spread across her tongue. Bitter, strong, real coffee, not the ersatz coffee made from acorns and chicory that Germans were drinking for the last 2 years of the war. She thought of home, of Germany. By 1944, coffee was rationed to 50 grams per person per month. Most civilians went without entirely. Coffee became a memory, a luxury from a world that no longer existed, and now an American soldier, a boy who lost his arm fighting her country, a boy she cared for through one long, feverish night. That boy saved part of his precious ration for her. She drank the coffee slowly. Every sip tasted like something she couldn't name. Something that felt like forgiveness but was too complicated to be just that. It tasted like being seen, like being recognized as human, like being given something freely without expectation of return. Just you work hard. Here is coffee. When she finished, she placed the empty cup back on the desk. She walked across the ward to bed 14. Private Chen looked up at her. His young face was serious. He couldn't have been more than a year or 2 out of high school. He should have been working on a farm somewhere, going to college, or falling in love. Instead, he was here with one arm and a future he didn't know how to navigate. Thank you, Margaret said quietly. Chen's expression shifted. Something in his eyes softened. You stayed with me when I was sick. You didn't have to do that. I am a nurse. You needed care. He nodded slowly. I know you're German. I know we're supposed to hate you. But you've been nothing but professional. Nothing but kind, so I figured you deserve coffee. Margaret felt something crack open inside her chest. A wall she built to survive the war. A wall that said, don't trust them. Don't let them in. Don't believe in kindness from the enemy. That wall fell. Not all at once, not completely, but enough. Enough to let in the possibility that maybe everything they told her was wrong. Maybe Americans weren't the monsters the propaganda painted. Maybe the enemy was more complicated than flags and borders and political rhetoric. Maybe the enemy was just people. People who could be cruel or kind. People who could hate or forgive. People who could choose what they wanted to be. And this boy, this American boy with one arm. He chose kindness. She nodded to him. Then she returned to work. But everything changed. 300 miles east in Illinois, Katharina Fisher faced a different kind of challenge. The rehabilitation center was a long, low building surrounded by flat farmland. Inside, the therapy room held parallel bars for walking practice. Wheelchairs lined the walls. Prosthetic limbs in various stages of fitting lay on benches like discarded parts. Her assignment was physical therapy, helping men learn to walk again with artificial legs. teaching them how to grip things with mechanical hands, showing them how to exist in bodies that no longer work the way they once did. The work was brutal, not physically, emotionally. Every day she watched grown men cry as they tried to stand on legs that weren't real. Every day she caught them when they fell. Every day she heard them curse God and the war in themselves. And every day one man refused her help entirely. Sergeant Robert Mitchell. Everyone called him Bobby, 28 years old, Texas ranch hand before the war. Both legs lost at the Battle of the Bulge when a German shell hit his foxhole on a frozen December morning. The first time Katerina approached his wheelchair, Bobby looked up at her with flat, hard eyes. "I'd rather not walk than have a Nazi help me." Then he wheeled himself away. The captain in charge called after him. "Sergeant Nurse Fisher is your assigned therapist." Bobby didn't turn around. "Then I guess I'm staying in this chair, sir." The captain looked at Katerina. "Give him a week. He'll come around. They always do." But Katerina didn't believe him. She saw that look before, on the Eastern Front. The look of a man who decided he was already dead and was just waiting for his body to catch up. For the first week, Bobby refused to work with her. He sat in his wheelchair in the corner of the therapy room and watched other patients struggle through their exercises. His face showed nothing. No anger, no pain, nothing. Katerina didn't push him. Every morning she would approach his wheelchair and say the same thing. "Good morning, Sergeant Mitchell. I will be here when you are ready to begin therapy." Then she would walk away and work with other patients. On the 8th day, things shifted. Katerina was helping another amputee practice walking between the parallel bars. The man was a corporal from Ohio who lost his left leg below the knee. He was making good progress. Small steps, steady improvement. Bobby watched from his wheelchair. His hands gripped the armrest tightly. His jaw was clenched. After the session ended, Katerina pushed the Ohio corporal's wheelchair back to his ward. When she returned to the therapy room, Bobby was still there, alone. She walked over to him. "Good morning, Sergeant Mitchell." He looked up at her. His eyes were different, still hard, still angry, but something else was there now too, something that looked like desperation. "Can you actually teach someone to walk again?" he asked. "Or is it all a lie?" Katerina met his eyes. "I can teach you, but you must be willing to fall many times first." "How many times?" "As many as it takes." Bobby's hands clenched on the wheelchair armrests. His knuckles went white. "I hate Germans. I hate you. The shell that took my legs was German. The man who fired it might have been someone you knew, someone you cared about." Katerina stood very still. "Yes, that is possible. So how can I let you help me? How can I trust you?" "You cannot. Not yet. But you can trust that I know how to do my job. And you can trust that I have helped men walk who hated me just as much as you do." Bobby stared at her for a long moment. Then he nodded once. "All right, show me." 2,000 miles west in San Diego, Elizabeth Braun walked into the burn ward and tried not to vomit. The smell was overwhelming. Charred skin, antiseptic ointment, the sickly sweet odor of healing flesh. It hit her like a physical blow, like being transported back to Dresden, to the night the city burned, to the endless hours of treating burn victims whose skin came off in sheets when she tried to help them. Her hands started shaking, her vision narrowed. The edges of the world went dark. Not now, not here. She forced herself to breathe, in through the nose, out through the mouth, the way the trauma nurse in Germany taught her after Dresden. In, out, in, out. The panic attack receded, slowly. Her vision cleared, her hands steadied. But she smelled worse. She survived worse. She could do this. The patients were Marines, young men burned by flamethrowers on Iwo Jima and Okinawa. Some had faces so scarred they could barely open their mouths to eat. Some had hands that were just stumps. Some had burns across 70% of their bodies, and the fact that they were still alive was a medical miracle. Major David Richardson, the head surgeon, looked at her with tired, skeptical eyes. "You've worked burn units before." "Yes, sir." "Dresden, after the firebombing." Richardson's expression shifted. He knew what Dresden was. The whole world knew. 25,000 dead in 2 nights. The city turned into an inferno so hot that the streets melted. "Then you've seen hell," he said quietly. "Yes, sir. Just like these boys." Richardson handed her a pair of surgical gloves. "Can you hand instruments without being told?" "Yes, sir." Then scrub in. I've got 11 surgeries scheduled today and I'm down 3 assistants. He started to walk away, then stop. Look back. And Nurse Braun, I don't care where you're from. I care if you can save lives. Can you? Elizabeth met his eyes. Yes, sir. I can. The first surgery was a skin graft. A 21-year-old Marine with burns across his chest and arms. The procedure took 3 hours. Elizabeth stood across the table from Richardson and handed him instruments in perfect sequence. Scalpel, forceps, sutures. Her hands moved automatically. She did this before. In field hospitals where there was no time to think, only to act. When the surgery ended, Richardson pulled off his gloves and looked at her. You've got good hands, steady hands. I was trained well. Where exactly did you work the Eastern Front? In Dresden, after the bombing. Richardson nodded slowly. Then you understand what these boys are going through. Yes, sir. I do. Over the next week, Elizabeth worked beside Richardson in surgery after surgery. And in the recovery ward, she met the patients afterward, changed their dressings, managed their pain medications, held their hands when the phantom burning started. The neurological echo of trauma that made them feel like they were on fire, even though the flames were long gone. One patient was different from the others. Marine James Sullivan, 22 years old, from Vermont, blinded by shrapnel at Okinawa when a Japanese grenade exploded 5 feet from his face. Elizabeth was assigned to his post-operative care in early July. Their first conversation happened on a morning when the San Diego sun poured through the hospital windows and made the ward almost cheerful. Almost, Elizabeth entered his room. Marine Sullivan, I am Nurse Braun. I will be assisting with your care. His head turned toward her voice. Bandages covered where his eyes used to be. His hands gripped the bedsheet. You're German, he said. It wasn't a question. Her accent gave her away. Yes, they're having Germans take care of us now, yes. I am here to help you navigate your room and begin rehabilitation. Silence. The only sound was the distant noise of the hospital, carts rolling, voices in the hallway, the mechanical hum of medical equipment. Then Jimmy said something unexpected. I can't see your face, I can only hear your voice. Yes. Are you scared of me because I'm American? Elizabeth pulled a chair beside his bed and sat down. Should I be? Jimmy's mouth twisted into something that might have been a bitter smile. I can't even see you. What threat am I? You are not a threat. You are a patient who needs care. That is all I see. Long pause. What do you see right now? What does the room look like? Elizabeth looked around. The room was small, standard hospital setup. One bed, one window, one chair, medical equipment on a rolling cart. But Jimmy couldn't see any of it. To him, the world was darkness, complete and permanent darkness. Your room has a window on the east wall, she said. The sun is coming through right now. It makes a square of light on the floor about 3 feet from your bed. The walls are pale yellow. There is a chair beside your bed where I am sitting. There is a door on the north wall. 5 steps from your bed to the window, 4 steps to the door. What color is the sky? Blue. Not dark blue, light blue. Like forget-me-not flowers. We have those in Vermont. My mother used to plant them around the porch. They are very beautiful. I'll never see them again, Jimmy said quietly. I'll never see anything again. Elizabeth didn't know what to say to that. There were no comforting words, no platitudes that could make blindness less terrible. So she said nothing. She just sat beside his bed in the square of sunlight and let the silence be what it was. After a while, Jimmy spoke again. What's your name? Your first name? Elizabeth. Elizabeth. That's pretty. How do you spell it? She spelled it. He repeated it, testing the syllables, making it real. Will you be my nurse? He asked. For as long as I'm here. Yes, I am assigned to your care. Good. Because if I have to be blind, at least I want someone who doesn't lie to me about what things look like. You didn't say the sky was beautiful or that everything would be okay. You just told me what color it was. Elizabeth nodded, then realized he couldn't see the gesture. Yes, I will always tell you the truth, even if it's ugly. Even then. All right, Jimmy said. All right, I think we can work together. And that was how it began. Back in Kansas, the morning after the coffee cup, a subtle shift occurred in Ward C. Margaret arrived for her shift and found a note tucked into her uniform pocket. She pulled it out and read it. The handwriting was different from Private Chen's. Older, shakier. Bed 27 needs new dressings. Infection is getting worse. He won't ask for help, but he needs it. From bed 14. Margaret looked across the ward. Private Chen was reading a letter from home. He didn't look up, but the message was clear. He was watching out for other patients, and he was trusting her to help. She went to bed 27. The patient was a sergeant in his 30s, leg amputated above the knee. He was one of the men who spat on the floor when she first arrived, one of the ones who muttered insults when she walked past. But now his wound was infected, red, swollen. The smell of it made her want to gag. "Sergeant, I need to change your dressing." He looked at her. His face was gray with pain. Finally, he nodded. She worked quickly, cleaned the wound, applied fresh antiseptic, wrapped it in clean bandages. The whole time he watched her face, studying her. When she finished, he spoke. "My name is Frank. Frank Morrison. Margaret Schmidt. You stayed all night with the Chen kid when he had fever." "Yes. Why, you don't owe us anything. We're your enemy." Margaret paused. Then she said the only thing that felt true. "Because I am a nurse, and you needed care." Frank nodded slowly. His expression was still hard, but the hostility had shifted. "Yeah. All right, I guess that makes sense. It was another beginning. Small, fragile, but real. Let me tell you something about Captain Sarah Bennett that Margaret didn't know yet. 7 months earlier in November 1944, Sarah's younger brother was killed in Germany. Lieutenant Thomas Bennett. Battle of Hürtgen Forest. German machine gun fire. He was 22 years old, just a kid, just a boy who wanted to be a school teacher after the war. Sarah got the telegram on her birthday. November 15th, she was working a double shift at a field hospital in France when the message arrived. "Your brother is dead, killed in action. We regret to inform you." She walked outside the hospital tent and stood in the rain for an hour. Just stood there. Not crying, not moving, just letting the cold water run down her face until she was numb enough to go back to work. After that, she requested a transfer. Away from the front lines, away from any place where she might have to treat German prisoners. She couldn't handle it. The anger was too raw, too close to the surface. They sent her to Kansas, to a hospital far from the war, where she could care for American boys coming home. Boys who reminded her of Tommy, boys she could save because she couldn't save her brother. And then the Army sent her 15 German nurses. When Sarah first heard the news, she went to her commanding officer. "Sir, I can't work with them. My brother—" He cut her off. "Captain, we're short 200 nurses. I don't care about your feelings. I care about keeping these boys alive. You'll work with whoever I assign." Dismissed. So Sarah did her job. Because that's what you did in the Army. You followed orders. You swallowed your feelings. You kept going, but every time she looked at Margaret, she saw the German machine gun that killed Tommy. Every single time. She watched Margaret work, watched her change bandages with steady hands, watched her stay late when patients were in pain, watched her take abuse from the men without complaining. And Sarah hated that she was good. Hated that Margaret was competent and professional and everything a nurse should be, because it would have been easier if she was terrible. Easier to hate her. Easier to justify the anger that burned in Sarah's chest like acid. But Margaret was good, damn good, and that made everything more complicated. On the morning of June 23rd, Sarah watched Margaret drink the coffee that Private Chen saved for her, watched the German nurse's face soften, watched her walk across the ward and thank the boy quietly. And Sarah felt the wall around her grief develop its first crack. She walked back to her office, closed the door, sat at her desk. On the wall was a photograph of Tommy, his high school graduation photo. Big smile, whole future ahead of him. "I don't know what to do," Sarah whispered to the photograph. "I don't know how to hate someone who's just trying to do the right thing. I don't know how to hold on to this anger when she's saving these boys the same way I am." The photograph didn't answer. It never did. But the crack had appeared. Small. Not enough to call it forgiveness, but enough to make her wonder if maybe the enemy was more complicated than she let herself believe. The same morning in Illinois, Bobby Mitchell took his first steps. Katerina fitted him with temporary prosthetic legs. Basic models, heavy, awkward, nothing like the advanced prosthetics that would come decades later, but functional enough to practice with. She helped him stand between the parallel bars, His hands gripped the bars so tightly his knuckles went white. His whole body shook with effort. Now, Katerina said, small step with left leg. Bobby lifted the prosthetic left leg, moved it forward 6 inches, set it down. The impact jarred through his body. He gasped. Good. Now right leg. He lifted the right prosthetic, moved it forward, set it down. 1 step, 2 steps. That's walking, Katerina said quietly. Bobby looked down at the prosthetics, at the metal and leather contraptions that replaced his legs, at the stumps of his thighs where they connected to the artificial limbs. This isn't walking, he said bitterly. This is a joke. It is walking. It will get easier. But yes, it will never be the same as before. I used to ride horses. I worked on a ranch. I could rope a steer and brand cattle and fix fences. What am I supposed to do now? Whatever you decide to do, but first you must learn to walk. Bobby took another step, then another. On the 3rd step, he lost his balance, started to fall. Katerina caught him, her hands steady on his arms, supporting him until he regained his grip on the parallel bars. See, she said, I told you, you will fall many times, and I will catch you every time. Bobby looked at her, really looked at her for the first time since she was assigned as his therapist. Her face was serious, professional, but there was something else there too, something that looked like understanding. How many men have you helped, he asked. Many, on the Eastern Front, in field hospitals, men with frostbite, men with amputations, men who wanted to die because they couldn't imagine living like this. Did they walk again? Some did, some gave up. The ones who walked were the ones who were willing to fall and keep trying. Bobby nodded slowly. He took another step, and another. On the 7th step, he fell again. Katerina caught him again, and that became their routine, every day. Fall and catch, until falling wasn't so scary anymore because he knew someone would be there to break his fall. 10 days after the coffee cup disaster struck, a patient in Illinois complained of severe nausea and dizziness. Corporal James Wright. The chart showed that Katerina Fisher signed for his morphine dose the night before. 10 milligrams, standard dosage. But when the head nurse checked the vial, the numbers didn't match. The vial was missing 15 milligrams. Not 10. Either Katerina gave him an overdose, or she was stealing drugs for herself, or someone tampered with the medication. An investigation was opened. Katerina was called to the head nurse's office. Inside the captain, the head nurse, a security officer, and Bobby Mitchell's American physical therapist. Nurse Fisher, the captain said, you signed for 10 milligrams of morphine for Corporal Wright at 10 o'clock last night. Is that correct? Yes, sir, that is correct. Corporal Wright is showing symptoms of morphine overdose. The vial is missing 15 milligrams, not 10. Katerina's face drained of color. That is impossible. I measured precisely. I always measure precisely. The security officer leaned forward. Are you taking morphine yourself, Nurse Fisher? For personal use? No, never. I am not. I would never. Then how do you explain the discrepancy? Katerina opened her mouth. No words came out because she couldn't explain it. She measured the dose carefully. She was certain. But the evidence said otherwise. The captain stood. You're removed from patient care pending investigation. Confined to barracks. Guard will be posted outside your door. Sir, please, I did not. Dismissed. Katerina sat alone in the nurses' barracks with an armed guard outside the door. The other German nurses looked at her with fear in their eyes. If Katerina was guilty, they were all at risk. If one German nurse was a drug thief, then maybe all of them were suspect. Rumors spread through the hospital like wildfire. The German nurse was stealing morphine. She tried to kill an American soldier. They're going to send all of them back to Germany. Katerina replayed the night over and over in her mind. She measured the morphine carefully, 10 milligrams exactly. She drew it into the syringe, administered it to Corporal Wright, made her notes on the chart, returned the vial to the locked cabinet, but doubt crept in. What if she made a mistake? What if in her tiredness she miscounted? What if she drew 15 milligrams instead of 10? No. She was certain. She did it correctly. But then where did the extra morphine go? In the therapy room, Bobby Mitchell heard about the accusation from another patient. His first reaction was anger. I knew it. I knew we couldn't trust them. They're Germans. They're the enemy. But then he remembered. He remembered Katharina catching him every time he fell, 20, 30 times a day. Her patient hands, her quiet voice saying, stand, try again, I will catch you. He remembered the day he screamed at her, I hate you, I hate all of you. And she simply said, I understand, but I will still be here tomorrow. She was nothing but professional, nothing but competent, nothing but kind, even when he was cruel. This didn't fit. This didn't make sense. That night, Bobby wheeled himself to the medication room. He wasn't supposed to be there. Patients weren't allowed in medical supply areas. But Bobby had a hunch. He examined the area where Katharina worked, the counter, the cabinet, the floor behind it, and then he saw it, behind the cabinet where it rolled when dropped. A vial cap. Bobby stretched from his wheelchair. His fingers barely reached it. He grabbed it and held it up to the light. The cap was from a morphine bottle, but it had residue. Extra morphine still caught in the threads. If Katharina overdosed the patient, there wouldn't be extra morphine in a drop cap. This meant someone else accessed the vial after Katharina used it. Someone tampered with it. Someone framed her. Bobby stared at the vial cap in his hand. Then he wheeled himself to the captain's office as fast as he could go. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. But now Bobby Mitchell, the Texas cowboy who swore he would rather die than accept help from a Nazi, was about to become Katharina Fisher's only hope. And what happened next would prove that sometimes the greatest act of courage isn't fighting your enemy. It's fighting for them. The next morning, Bobby Mitchell wheeled himself into the captain's office without knocking. Sir, I found something. The captain looked up from his paperwork, irritation crossing his face. Sergeant, you're supposed to... Bobby slammed the vial cap onto the desk. This was behind the medication cabinet. It's got morphine residue. If Nurse Fisher overdosed the patient, there wouldn't be extra morphine in a dropped cap. This means someone else accessed the vial after her. The captain picked up the cap, examined it carefully. His expression shifted from irritation to interest. Sergeant, why are you defending her? She's German. She's the enemy. Bobby met his eyes without flinching. Because she's also the best therapist I've had. And I don't think she's a thief or a saboteur. I think someone's setting her up. The captain stared at him. You've changed your mind about her. Yes, sir. I have. Why? Bobby's voice was quiet but firm. Because she's caught me every time I fell. And I think it's time I caught her. The captain was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded. I'll continue the investigation. Thank you, Sergeant. Further inquiry revealed the truth. The orderly, an American named Walter Hayes, 35 years old, who worked the night shift. His younger brother was killed at Normandy, killed by German machine gun fire. When confronted with the evidence, Hayes confessed. His hands shook as he spoke. They shouldn't be here. They're the enemy. They killed my brother. I wanted to prove they couldn't be trusted. I wanted them all gone. The captain's voice was ice. Did you think about the fact that you could have killed Corporal Wright? Hayes' face went blank. He hadn't thought about that. He was so focused on destroying the German nurses that he nearly killed an American soldier. The very boys he claimed to be protecting. He was arrested, dishonorably discharged, court-martialed within the week, and Katharina was cleared of all charges. The captain called her to his office. Nurse Fisher investigation concluded. You are cleared. The orderly confessed to tampering with the medication. You will be reinstated immediately. Katharina's relief came out as tears she couldn't hide. She was holding herself together through sheer will for 3 days. Now the wall broke. The captain continued. And Sergeant Mitchell advocated strongly for you. He found the evidence that cleared you. After she left the captain's office, Katharina found Bobby in the therapy room. He was practicing standing at the parallel bars, alone. You defended me, she said. Bobby looked up. His hands still gripped the bars tightly. Because I know you. You've caught me every time I fell. You've been patient when I was cruel. You don't deserve to be blamed for something you didn't do. But I am German. You are American. We are enemies. Bobby shook his head slowly. We're enemies. Past tense. I'm starting to think we're something else now. What I don't know yet. But it's not enemies. Katharina felt something break open in her chest. All her life she believed what the Reich told her. That nationality mattered more than character. That ideology determined worth. That Germans were superior and everyone else was lesser. But this American cowboy, who had every reason to hate her, risked his reputation to save her. He chose justice over revenge. He chose to see her as a person, not just as the enemy. Everything she believed was wrong. That night, she wrote in her journal. The entry would later be preserved in the National Archives when she donated her papers before her death. Today I was accused, investigated, nearly sent away. And it was an American soldier who saved me. An American soldier I once thought of as the enemy. Everything I believed was wrong. The Americans are not cruel. They are not heartless. Some hate us, yes, but some see us as human. And that changes everything. I think I have been wrong my entire life about what makes someone good or evil. It is not what flag they salute. It is what they do when someone needs help. She closed the journal, placed it under her pillow. Tomorrow she would return to the therapy room. Tomorrow Bobby would try to walk again, and she would catch him when he fell. Just as he caught her, the autumn of 1945 turned to winter. November arrived with cold winds that swept across the Kansas plains. Snow began to fall in Illinois. California stayed mild and golden. By late November, the hostility in most wards faded. Not completely, not everywhere, but enough. The German nurses were no longer strangers. They were the woman who sang quietly while changing bandages, the one who stayed late when a patient was in pain, the one who remembered how each man liked his pillows arranged. In Kansas, Private Chen saved extra biscuits for Margaret. "You need to eat too, ma'am," she would protest. He would insist. It became their routine. Sergeant Frank Morrison, the man whose infected wounds she treated, began asking for her by name. Not just any nurse, Schmidt specifically. "She knows how to wrap the stump without it hurting." Other patients noticed. The word spread through Ward C. The German nurse is good, real good. Show some respect. In California, Major Richardson invited Elizabeth to assist in more complex surgeries. During one particularly difficult skin graft, he told the surgical team, "Braun's got the steadiest hands I've ever seen. Learn from her." And in Illinois, Bobby Mitchell told new patients about Katharina before they even met her. "She's good people. Saved me from staying in this chair for life. You'll work with her, and you'll be grateful for it." But as Christmas approached, the men in Bobby's rehabilitation ward had an idea. They watched Katharina for months. She never complained, never took extra breaks, never asked for anything. She worked her shifts, ate her meals in the staff cafeteria, then returned to the barracks. She owned nothing but 2 uniforms and a small bag of personal items. Bobby called a meeting in the therapy room. 5 other patients gathered around. All amputees, all in wheelchairs, all men Katharina helped learn to walk again. "We should do something for Kat," Bobby said, "for Christmas." The agreement was immediate, but what, in 1945, military hospitals ran on a barter economy. Cigarettes were currency. Soldiers traded them for favors, for extra dessert, for magazines, for writing paper. A full carton could buy almost anything. The 6 men decided they would pool their cigarette rations. For 3 weeks, they saved every cigarette they received. Instead of smoking them, they stored them under their pillows, counted them like treasure. Every day, resist the urge to smoke. Every day, add to the pile. Other patients noticed. "What are you boys doing Christmas present?" "For the German nurse." Some laughed. Some thought they were crazy. But no one interfered. Finally, they had enough. They traded the cigarettes to a hospital clerk for 1 Hershey's chocolate bar. December 24th, 1945. Christmas Eve. Snow fell outside the rehabilitation center. Inside, the therapy room was decorated with paper chains made by patients who had too much time and not enough to do with their hands. A small Christmas tree sat in the corner, donated by a local farmer. Katharina arrived for her evening shift. Bobby and the 5 others were waiting. They arranged their wheelchairs in a semicircle. Bobby held out a small package wrapped in brown paper and tied with string, saved from medical supply boxes. "We pooled our cigarette rations," he said. "Took us 3 weeks. Got you something for Christmas." Katharina's hands trembled as she took the package. She unwrapped it slowly, carefully, preserving the paper as if it were valuable. Inside was a Hershey's chocolate bar. She stared at it, her vision blurred with tears. "I cannot accept this." Bobby's voice was firm. "Yes, you can. You've earned it. Another soldier spoke up. A corporal from Michigan. You stayed with me when I had nightmares. When I woke up screaming about the beach at Normandy. You didn't have to do that, a third soldier added. You treat us like we matter, like we're still men, not just broken parts. A fourth. You never gave up on me even when I gave up on myself. Katerina looked at each of them. These men who had every reason to hate her. These men who fought against her country. These men who lost limbs and futures in the lives they planned. And they gave her their cigarette rations. For 3 weeks, the only comfort they had in this place. She broke the chocolate bar into 6 equal pieces, handed one to each man. Then we share it, she said, her voice thick with emotion, like a family. They sat together that Christmas Eve, eating chocolate while snow fell outside the windows. The therapy room was warm. The paper chains swayed slightly in the heat from the radiators. The small Christmas tree glowed with a few lights. Bobby said, "This is the first time since I lost my legs that Christmas feels like Christmas." Katerina replied, "This is the first time I have felt human in 3 years." It was a perfect moment, a moment of peace in a world that knew too much war. But 2,000 miles away in California, a storm was gathering that would threaten to destroy everything. Let me tell you about Marine James Sullivan and the woman who became his eyes. For 3 months, Elizabeth described the world to Jimmy. Every day she would sit beside his bed and tell him what he could no longer see. The sky is gray today, like iron. It looks heavy like it might rain. There are seagulls outside your window. 3 of them. They're fighting over something on the lawn. The ocean is calm this morning. I can see it from here. It's the color of steel with white foam on the waves. She read him letters from his family in Vermont. His mother wrote about the maple trees turning color. His father wrote about fixing the barn roof. His younger sister wrote about school and boys and all the normal things that happen in a world not broken by war. Elizabeth helped him learn to navigate without sight. 5 steps from your bed to the window. 4 steps to the door. 6 steps to the bathroom. Turn right at the door, then 3 steps forward. When he knocked things over, she never made him feel foolish. When he became frustrated, she never told him it would be okay. She just told him the truth. It will be difficult, but you will learn. And slowly, Jimmy began to feel human again. One afternoon in early December, the dynamic between them shifted. Jimmy was practicing walking with his cane. Elizabeth guided him around the room. He was doing well. Confident steps, good spatial awareness. Then he stopped, turned toward where he knew she was standing. "Elizabeth, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Why do you do this? Why do you care so much about helping me?" She was quiet for a moment. "Because I know what it feels like to lose the world. I lost Dresden. I lost my city. I lost everything I thought was permanent. And someone helped me keep going. Now I help you." "Who helped you?" She hesitated. Then, "You did. Helping you helps me heal too." Jimmy reached out his hand, found hers, held it. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for making me believe I'm still worth something." "You are worth everything," Elizabeth whispered. That was the moment. That was when it stopped being just nurse and patient, when it became something else, something dangerous. In mid-December, Jimmy made a decision. He asked Elizabeth to sit beside his bed. He reached under his pillow and pulled out a small wooden box. "I can't see this," he said. "I'll never be able to see it. But you can." He opened the box. Inside lay his Purple Heart medal, the decoration given to American soldiers wounded in combat. Bronze medal, purple ribbon, the symbol of sacrifice. "I want you to have it," Jimmy said. "Carry it for me, so someone who understands what it cost can keep it safe." Elizabeth's breath caught. "James, I cannot take this. This is yours. You earned this." "I earned it by getting hurt. You earned it by putting people back together. You've seen the same hell I have. Dresden. You told me about Dresden, the 25,000 dead, the firebombing. You understand what it cost to survive," Elizabeth told him. On a night when he couldn't sleep, when the phantom pain was too much, when he needed to think about something other than his own suffering. She told him about the night Dresden burned, about the people she couldn't save, about the guilt she carried. And Jimmy listened. He held her hand while she cried. A blind Marine holding the hand of his German nurse while she grieved a city he would never see. Now he was offering her his most precious possession. "You deserve to carry something that says you survived," Jimmy said. "Please." Elizabeth took the box with trembling hands. She lifted out the metal. The weight of it settled into her palm. Heavy, significant. She cared for hundreds of German soldiers, watched 312 of them die. She never received a medal, never received thanks from her own government, only orders, only demands for more work, more hours, more sacrifice. And now an enemy soldier, a man blinded by her nation's allies, a man who had every reason to hate her. He was giving her his Purple Heart. "I will keep it safe," she whispered. "I promise." "Thank you," Jimmy said. "You're the first person since I lost my sight who's made me feel like I still matter. You matter to me." The words hung in the air between them. Words that meant more than they should. Words that crossed the line between professional and personal. Elizabeth placed the medal around her neck. She would wear it there, every day, for the next 56 years. But that night someone saw them, someone heard them, and that someone reported what they heard. Lieutenant Mary Cooper was the night shift nurse supervisor. She was walking past a supply closet when she heard voices. Jimmy and Elizabeth. She stopped. She shouldn't have listened. But she did. Jimmy's voice came through the door. "When this is over, when they send you back to Germany, I won't be able to find you. I can't see to write. I can't see to travel." Elizabeth's voice thick with emotion. "I know. I don't want to lose you. You're the only good thing that came from this war. You cannot say things like this. I am a prisoner. You are a patient. This is not allowed. I don't care what's allowed. I'm blind. I've lost everything. But I found you. That has to mean something." Then silence. Then the sound of crying. Then quiet words Cooper couldn't make out. She walked away, her face troubled. The next morning she reported to Major Richardson. "Sir, I believe Nurse Braun and Marine Sullivan have developed an inappropriate relationship." Richardson's face hardened. "Are you certain? I overheard them last night. There were implications of romantic involvement. That violates every regulation. She's a prisoner of war. He's a patient. This is a serious breach." Richardson called Elizabeth to his office. "Nurse Braun, sit down." Elizabeth knew immediately that trouble had arrived. "It has come to my attention that you and Marine Sullivan have formed a personal relationship beyond professional bounds. Is this true?" "We have become friends. He is my patient. Friends don't speak the way you were overheard speaking." Elizabeth's face drained of color. "Do you understand the gravity of this? You are a prisoner of war. He is under your care. This is a violation of protocol of ethics of military regulations." Richardson leaned forward. "You will be reassigned effective immediately. No further contact with Marine Sullivan. Please, sir, what he needs is professional medical care, not emotional entanglement with the enemy. I am not the enemy anymore." Richardson paused. His voice was quiet. "Aren't you?" The question hung in the air like an accusation. "You have 24 hours to pack your belongings. You're being transferred to a different hospital. Location to be determined. You are not permitted to say goodbye to Marine Sullivan. Dismissed." Elizabeth stood. Her legs barely held her. She walked out of the office and down the corridor. The Purple Heart medal hung heavy around her neck. That night, Jimmy learned she was gone. Another nurse told him. "Marine Sullivan, Nurse Braun, has been reassigned." His face went blank. "What?" "Where I'm not at liberty to say. You'll have a new nurse starting tomorrow." "No, I need to talk to her, please. I'm sorry, she's gone." That night, Jimmy did something that defied all reason and all sense. He navigated the hospital alone, blind, using only his cane and his memory of the layout. He crashed into walls, knocked over equipment. Staff tried to stop him. "Marine, get back to bed. I need to find Elizabeth," security was called. They found him outside the nurses' barracks, collapsed on the ground. His hands were bleeding from multiple falls. His face was desperate. "I just need to talk to her. Please. I just need to tell her." Elizabeth heard the commotion, ran outside. "Jimmy." He turned toward her voice. "They said you're leaving. They won't let me say goodbye. You should not be here. You will get in trouble. I don't care. I can't see. I can't write. If you leave, I'll never find you again." And I can't lose you. Major Richardson arrived. He took in the scene. A blind Marine on the ground bleeding. A German nurse in tears. A public violation of direct orders. Marine Sullivan, return to your ward immediately. Nurse Braun, come with me. In Richardson's office at 2 in the morning, the final judgment came. This ends now. You have put Marine Sullivan at risk. He injured himself trying to reach you. This is precisely why fraternization is forbidden. I never meant to hurt him. And instead you've made him dependent on you. What happens when you leave? When you go back to Germany, he'll be shattered all over again. Richardson's voice was cold, but not cruel. Almost sad. You have two options. One, transfer immediately. Never contact Sullivan again. Clean break. Or two, I report this officially. You face disciplinary hearing, possible court-martial, deportation, and all 147 German nurses come under review because of your actions. Elizabeth understood. Her choice didn't just affect her. It affected every German nurse in America. I will transfer. I will not contact him again. Good, you leave in the morning. But that night, Elizabeth wrote a letter she would not send for 56 years, a letter that would remain hidden until 3 months before her death. Dear James, I am writing this the night they separated us. I do not know if you will ever read this. I do not even know if I will ever have the courage to send it. But I need to write it, because I need to believe that love is stronger than war, that mercy is stronger than hatred. You could not see my face, you could only hear my voice and feel my hands. And that was enough for you to trust me. You taught me that blindness is not in the eyes but in the heart. I will carry your purple heart, and I will carry the memory of you, always. She sealed the letter, hid it in her belongings, wore the Purple Heart medal under her uniform where no one could see. The next morning, she was transferred to a hospital in Texas, 2,000 miles from San Diego. 2,000 miles from the only person who made her feel whole since Dresden burned. Before we continue, I want to ask you something. Do you believe in second chances? Do you believe people can change, even people who were once your enemy? Because that's what this story is really about. Not just German nurses and American soldiers, but the choice to see someone as human instead of just seeing where they came from. If you've ever given someone a second chance or received one yourself, drop a comment below, share your story, and hit that like button if you believe mercy is stronger than hatred, because you're about to see mercy tested like never before. Late December 1945, Captain Bennett's office. Bennett called Margaret in. Not for discipline, just to talk. Schmidt, sit down. Margaret sat hands folded in her lap, waiting. Bennett looked at the photograph of her brother on the wall, then back at Margaret. I need to tell you something. 7 months ago, when I learned German nurses were being assigned here, I asked to be transferred. I didn't want to work with you, any of you. Margaret stayed silent. My brother was killed by German machine gun fire at Hurtgen Forest. He was 22. He wanted to be a teacher. Bennett's voice caught. She cleared her throat. I thought I would hate you. I wanted to hate you. It would have been easier. She paused. But you've been nothing but professional. Nothing but competent. You saved Morrison's leg. You stayed up all night with Chen. You do your job better than some American nurses I've worked with. Bennett met Margaret's eyes. I was wrong about you, and I'm sorry. Margaret's throat tightened. Thank you, ma'am. Don't thank me. You earned this. You earned respect through your actions. That's all any of us can do. Bennett stood, extended her hand. You're a good nurse, Schmidt. Your country should be proud of you. Margaret shook her hand, felt the weight of forgiveness in that grip. My country destroyed itself, ma'am, but maybe here I can build something new. That's the American way, Bennett said quietly. Second chances, January 1946. The war was over. Japan surrendered in September. Germany surrendered the previous May. World War II was officially finished. But the question remained, what should be done with the 147 German nurses? Technically, they could be sent back to Germany. The war was over. They were prisoners. Prisoners go home. But Germany in January 1946 was not home. It was hell. The country was divided into occupation zones. America, Britain, France, the Soviet Union. Each zone governed by different rules, different systems, different levels of brutality. Over 7 million Germans were homeless. Cities lay in ruins. Food supplies collapsed. The average civilian consumed only 900 calories per day, half the amount needed for survival. Tuberculosis and typhus spread unchecked. Children starved in the streets. Women traded their bodies for bread. The infrastructure was destroyed. The economy was non-existent. Then in mid-January, disaster struck. An American soldier died during Margaret's night shift in Kansas. Corporal Michael Torres, 24 years old, from New Mexico. Cause of death, pulmonary embolism. A blood clot to the lung. Sudden, unpredictable. Nothing anyone could have done. But the timing was terrible. Margaret was the only nurse in the ward when it happened. Torres's family was notified. They demanded an investigation. Why was a German nurse alone with our son? How do we know she didn't kill him? The media picked up the story. German prisoner cares for American soldier. Soldier dies. Public outcry erupted. Veterans groups protested. Newspaper editorials demanded action. Why are we treating enemy nurses better than our own? A congressional inquiry was launched. Are German prisoners receiving preferential treatment? The autopsy confirmed what Margaret already knew. Pulmonary embolism. No foul play, no negligence, just bad luck. Just death in a place where too many young men already died. But the damage was done. Public trust in the German nurses was shattered. On January 15, 1946, the War Department issued an order. All German prisoners of war to be repatriated by March 1946. All 147 nurses would be sent back to Germany. Back to the ruins, back to the starvation, back to a country that no longer existed as they knew it. The reactions came swiftly. In Kansas, Captain Sarah Bennett walked into her office and slammed the door. This is wrong. Schmidt is an excellent nurse. This is politics, not justice. Private Chen started a petition. Patients signed it. We want the German nurses to stay. We trust them. They saved our lives. Sergeant Frank Morrison wrote a letter to the War Department. His handwriting was shaky but determined. Nurse Schmidt changed my dressings when my wound was infected. She saved my leg. Maybe saved my life. She is not the enemy. She is a healer. In Illinois, Bobby Mitchell wheeled himself to his commander's office. Sir, you can't send Nurse Fisher back. She's the reason I can walk. The commander's voice was flat. Sergeant, this is not your decision. Then I'm making it my fight. Bobby organized the other patients. All of them wrote letters. All of them testified to Katharina's care, to her patience, to her skill, to the fact that she treated them with more dignity than some American nurses did. The letters poured into Washington, over 400 of them, from soldiers and their families. She saved my life. She treated me with dignity when I felt broken. She never gave up on me. Judge her by what she's done, not where she's from. But the most powerful advocacy came from the woman who first greeted them at New York Harbor. Colonel Helen Patterson submitted a formal report to the War Department. These 147 German medical personnel have served with distinction and professionalism for 8 months. They have provided essential care to over 12,000 wounded American soldiers. Patient satisfaction surveys show 89% positive interactions. Medical officers report them as essential personnel during the manpower shortage. 0 incidents of sabotage, 0 security breaches. I recommend they be allowed to remain in the United States as medical workers until such time as Germany can adequately receive them. More importantly, sending them back now would send a message to the world that America's mercy was conditional, that we treat the defeated with dignity only when it's convenient. That's not who we are. The War Department faced a choice: follow policy and deport the nurses, or recognize that sometimes mercy matters more than rules. March 1947. More than a year after the deportation order, the War Department announced its decision. German nurses would be allowed to remain in the United States until Germany stabilized, or they could choose to return immediately. Each nurse must decide for herself. Margaret received a letter from her mother in Berlin. Come home, Margaret. Your sister needs you. But I understand if you stay. You have found something there that Germany cannot give you now. Peace, Vice. Margaret thought about Private Chen's coffee, about the patients who asked for her by name, about Captain Bennett, who recommended her for additional responsibilities. She thought about the 312 names in her notebook, the soldiers she couldn't save, and she thought about the hundreds she saved in America. She wrote back, I cannot save Germany. It is too broken. But here I can save lives every day. And maybe that's how I make peace with the lives I couldn't save during the war. I am staying. Katharina's family was in Vienna in the Soviet occupation zone. Communication was nearly impossible. Bobby offered to sponsor her. Stay. Work here. I'll vouch for you. But Katharina thought of her family, of Austria, of the knowledge she gained in America. Knowledge about humanity, about dignity, about treating people as people. My family needs me, she told Bobby. Austria needs rebuilding. I learned here what real humanity looks like. I take that knowledge home. Maybe I can help rebuild not just buildings, but hearts. Their final conversation happened in the therapy room on a spring morning. You taught me to walk again, Bobby said. You taught me to see people instead of flags. Will you write to me? I will. And you keep walking, cowboy. They hugged, not as enemies, not even as allies, as family. And Elizabeth. Elizabeth was at a hospital in Texas for 14 months. She and Jimmy had no contact. But in March 1947, she made her choice. Stay. She traveled to San Diego, found Jimmy in the rehabilitation garden. He learned to navigate outdoor spaces with his white cane. She stood watching him sit on a bench, face turned toward the sun. Then she spoke the words she said to him 100 times. The sky is blue today. There are clouds that look like cotton. Jimmy's head snapped toward her voice. His face transformed. Elizabeth. She crossed the distance, sat beside him. I'm staying in America. If you still want... Jimmy reached for her hand, found it. I've been waiting for you to come back since the day you left. She touched the purple heart medal still around her neck. I wear this every day. I know, Jimmy said softly. I know. They married in 1949, had 3 children. Thomas, Maria, Helen. Jimmy never regained his sight, but he saw more clearly than anyone Elizabeth ever knew. He died in 1998. For 3 years, Elizabeth carried his medal alone. And then in 2001, she decided it was time to send it home. The epilogue writes itself in the lives they lived. Of the 147 German nurses, 73 returned to Germany. 74 stayed in America. Margaret Schmidt worked at Topeka Military Hospital until 1968, became an American citizen in 1949, married an American veteran in 1950, never returned to Germany, died in 2000, age 78. Katharina Fischer returned to Vienna in 1948, worked at a rehabilitation hospital until retirement in 1985, maintained correspondence with Bobby Mitchell until his death in 1989, never married. When asked why, she replied, I gave my heart to helping people walk. That was enough. Elizabeth Braun married James Sullivan in 1949, worked as a surgical nurse until 1982. James became a counselor for blind veterans. Elizabeth died in 2001, 3 months after returning the Purple Heart to his family. Bobby Mitchell returned to his Texas ranch, learned to ride horses with prosthetic legs, became a minor legend, died in 1989. His last letter to Katharina read, You taught me to walk, but more importantly, you taught me to see people's hearts instead of their flags. Captain Sarah Bennett continued as head nurse until retirement in 1965, advocated for integration of international medical staff in American hospitals. Her obituary read, She believed in judging people by their actions, not their origins. This story is not widely known. It doesn't appear in most history books, but it should, because it reveals a truth more powerful than any battle. Compassion, not conquest, wins the longest wars. These 147 women crossed the Atlantic as enemies. They expected cruelty. They found kindness. They worked among the wounded and discovered that pain has no nationality. In the end, America's greatest weapon was not its bombs or its bullets. It was its ability to see the humanity in those it defeated. The German nurses who arrived in June 1945 carried with them propaganda, trauma, and fear. They expected punishment. They received respect. They expected hatred. They received care. And in return, they gave everything they learned in the worst years of the war: skill, compassion, endurance, to the very soldiers who defeated their nation. This was not a political gesture. It was a quiet revolution, proof that even in the aftermath of the most destructive war in history, individual human beings could choose a different path. They could choose to heal instead of harm, to forgive instead of judge, to see each other not as Germans or Americans, but simply as people trying to survive the same suffering. In that choice lies the only victory that truly matters. And that choice is still ours to make, every single day. If this story moved you, share it, because mercy is not a sign of weakness. Mercy is the most powerful weapon America has ever possessed, and it always will be.